Welcome to this special Legends series with myself, Simon Akers, and Richard Flower from Ashford Kitchens Interiors. Today's Legends is all about how a KBB business has gone from 40 years establishment to where they are today, but what's made them successful. Richard, thank you very much for joining us today. In fact, we're in your house, and I feel very honoured to be invited
You're
for
most welcome.
This Legends series. So we've known each other a few years.
Indeed.
And I think we call ourselves friends.
We do indeed.
Thank you for saying that. I'm just checking of that bit actually. So the first question that I always ask is, why did you get into KBB? And what advice would you have for someone thinking about doing the same thing?
Right, well, I got into it because all through the 1970s, in fact, starting in 1969, I worked for a large independent furniture retailer. And in those...
Are we naming names?
They've long gone, actually.
Okay.
In those days, kitchens were generally sold by hardware stores, builders merchants, and some kitchen retailers.
We're talking 40 years ago.
This is more like 50 years ago.
50 years ago, okay. Okay.
And the retailer that I worked with decided to take on kitchens, and we did Hygiena System 70.
Okay.
We did a bit of C-Matic.
Right.
They were new to the country then. I think we were one of the first dealers.
Okay.
And old names that are long gone, like Eastham and Qualcast.
Eastham Kitchen, I remember Eastham Kitchen.
Yeah.
The green stencil.
That's it, yeah.
Yeah.
I was very young, but because I was the only one that knew anything about metric measurements, and because I think, frankly, most of the others were a bit scared of kitchens, so yes, I ended up running the kitchen department, which I was very pleased about, and it was quite exciting, really. The actual order values were pretty large. And there was a lot to it. It wasn't just like selling
more technical.
Yeah, exactly. Not like selling a piece of furniture.
Yeah, or a mattress.
It was a proper job. And as time went by, we saw the growth of kitchen specialists, which I suppose started off in the earlier 70s.
Are these independents?
Generally independents. Yeah.
Okay.
And they did the complete job of designing, supplying, installation, and that seemed to be the way forward.
Because you learned a skill then?
Exactly, because prior to that, a lot of kitchens were installed by builders or DIY people.
And they would buy those kitchens from a builder's merchant, you said?
Yeah, or from us, the kitchen
So
retailer.
the consumer would go to the builder who would buy the kitchen, and then it started to change?
It gradually started to change as things became more complicated. It became more specialist, and a lot of builders, especially at times when they were busy, they couldn't really be too bothered at spending a lot of time on kitchens.
Right.
So they needed much more backup.
Yeah.
So that was really the advent of the kitchen specialist.
Okay.
And the company I worked for, my boss took on 4 dealerships with Schreiber kitchens and bedrooms, who were sort of quite early into the game, and they were British. It was a British brand, and very powerful marketing, and we did very well with those 4 outlets. And I soon realised that it was probably getting towards the time I should branch out on my own. I could see the opportunity, and it took me literally a couple of years of research to find a location which was both right and affordable. And eventually, with our first new baby due at any time, and with little financial backing, I was very lucky to find a perfect site in Ashford in Surrey.
Oh, that's the original first shop?
That is the original shop,
right.
which we opened in 1984. Yeah.
Right, okay. What was the catalyst that made you decide, actually, I can move on from this furniture department store to do my own thing? What was the one thing that said, I'm going to do this now?
Well, I decided that being a kitchen specialist was the right way of selling kitchens, and it was just my ambition really to run my own business.
To work for yourself.
Yeah,
Did anybody advise you at the time?
Which I think, ever since I was a child, really, I thought, well, I've got to have my own business because, I'm going to get to the point where nobody's going to employ me, really.
Did somebody at that time advise you on the next steps of running your own? Because a lot of times, in my career in kitchens, you might be a kitchen installer or a kitchen fitter and say, oh, I can do that. But somebody invariably advises them how to do that. Who advised you at the time?
I suppose you could say I took my advice from my past employer.
Right, okay.
Because they were actually very good people. They were very good to me. And I think they took me on as a youngster. I think I was just 17 when I started. And, really helped me along.
Okay.
And I guess I learned most things from them.
Okay, so knowing what you know from that experience, what advice can you give those who may be watching thinking, do you know what, actually, I've listened to Richard talk about his story and probably I could do it myself. What advice would you give them in today's market?
I think it's never easy. A lot of people look back and say it was easier in the old days, but I don't think it's ever, any time it's easy. There's always issues and problems going on all just around the corner. So you've got to be resilient, and I think you've got to like working with people and with the public. That's an important thing.
Talking to people.
Exactly.
That's a skill set. So if you're someone that's a little bit shy and retiring, or you're an introvert as an individual, maybe that's not the job for you potentially.
Not running a business, I wouldn't have thought.
That's good advice. So the advice there is to look at yourself and say, am I the kind of person that's gregarious, wants to talk to people, gets on with people, and puts 2 feet forward, rather than somebody that's shy and retiring? If you're that kind of person, maybe consider doing something different.
And you've got to realise it is always a risk,
right?
Because I think it's 2 out of 3 new businesses fail within 2 years.
Correct. So you're saying, ask yourself, are you a risk taker? If you're not a risk taker, maybe that's not the thing for you. Okay, that's good advice. Thank you.
And it's possibly slightly easier if you haven't got a lot to lose.
Right. Okay. Of course. Yeah. So winding the clock forward, you just celebrated your 40th year in business, and I know you're a very proud dad to the family that have continued the business and carrying on flourishing in an amazing way. We've talked about earlier the social media and the marketing, and everything's getting stronger and stronger. So given all of that 40 years later, what do you think is making or has made Ashford so successful?
Well, thank you for saying that. I'm very pleased at the success. I don't think that there has ever been a time when it hasn't been relatively successful, except perhaps during a terrible recession we had in the early 90s, when we were sort of hanging on by our fingernails like a lot of people. But generally speaking, I think we do invest well in people. We get good people on board, and we really...
That's really interesting. The number one answer is investing in your asset, which is your people first.
People.
Yeah.
Good people, and we try really hard to keep them if they are good. Really, retention. Retention.
Yeah. So what ways would you advise? If you're dealing with people, and particularly we mentioned earlier about salespeople. What advice could you offer about how do you retain? Let's as a designer, let's say salespeople. How does a company retain salespeople? What methods would you employ to do that?
Well, I think all categories: fitters, designer, salespeople, and admin.
Okay.
They're all equally important, and you just have to understand them really.
Right.
You have to know their job and be interested and help them along.
Yeah.
Because salespeople can often be a bit, diva-ish.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, they are
I'm
actors.
I'm a big diva, me, Richard.
I know. They are actors on the stage, if you like.
Yeah.
So everybody has got to support them. They've got to hold them up.
Right.
And never in any circumstances run them down.
Yeah.
because they are the people that are bringing the money in.
How important is feedback to your staff?
Oh yeah. I mean, people have got to know how they're doing. So generally, they need nurturing and praise where it's due.
Yeah.
And criticism is a harsh word, but correcting if they're not doing
constructive
it. Constructive criticism, exactly. That's the one.
Ashford is quite clearly a family business. How important is that, do you think, in the customer message about why a customer should buy from you?
Well, we really use that. We promote ourselves as a second generation family business, and most people really like the idea of that. And we live locally to the business. We've been here a long time, and we get involved with local things like the schools, church, village hall, sports clubs.
Yeah.
So that all those people can see our name,
who are connected to those,
and get to know us as people.
Yeah, makes sense.
With the name Flower is slightly distinctive.
Yeah.
So people remember our name.
Yes.
And so they kind of think they know us.
Yeah.
And people do buy from people.
Yes.
People buy from people.
Yeah.
And particularly people that they like and can get on with.
Yeah. So the advice is, if anyone's watching that's thinking, how do I increase my business, is actually get involved in the local community in whichever way, whether it's we mentioned the village hall committee, whatever it might be, or a youth club or a scouts hut situation where you can perhaps donate something. I don't know, Richard, that may be seen as being quite positive for the local community. And then people talk, as you say.
I think so. We put kitchens in schools and sports clubs, and put a little badge on. Oh, and scout hut. Yeah. And all the parents are really our customers. Yeah, maybe,
as you say, maybe if you had like an X display potentially, then you might be able to, rather than sell it for £399, what have you, you might get more merit from donating it potentially.
Absolutely, yeah. We usually actually supply it and install it.
Oh right,
so,
even better,
whole job, so that people can see what we do.
Yeah, great.
And I mean, it's such a lot of goodwill. People think, oh, they must be good people. We'll go and talk to them. They may not end up buying from us, but at least we get a chance.
So I drill down a bit more to the family marketing, because marketing is so important for most companies, and I think you guys absolutely get it right. So how important is that in the conversation when the customer comes in? How do you or the team get that in the conversation as quickly as possible, or do they tend to know up front?
Well, some and some really, Simon. A lot of people come in and they say, oh, we've seen you on TikTok, and we saw Amy doing the cooking or doing the dancing on the table, and that's really good because they think they
What is this TikTok you speak about? Exactly.
Whatever that is, don't ask me.
Right, okay.
And
I'm in the same club.
And that is really good because they kind of think that they know the people. And they say, oh yeah, you're that chap that was doing that silly bit of cooking.
So there's almost like there's some identification for the people that they could be dealing with.
The team,
quite quickly.
The team, yeah.
That's very special. So that's the advice. Is if you wanted to spend more time bringing more people in, spend more time telling people about the people they'll be dealing with, because by these, like you say, the TikTok and so forth, and the facial recognition, they feel that they want to buy from these people. Yeah.
Really, yeah, they do.
Half the job's been done.
They kind of feel as though they know us, and they know we all sort of get on well together, like a family.
Yeah, certainly we always follow your Christmas films, which like that. Yeah. It's a good feeling, isn't it?
Yeah, it does amaze me that people actually watch them, but they certainly do. And they definitely don't use the yellow pages anymore.
No, unless you're using yellow pages stand to get into a kitchen cupboard. If you're not quite tall enough, so yeah. Looking back in time, just on that subject of marketing again, over 40 years, what was the best marketing campaign that you did, or were you supported by a manufacturer that you did? And if that was successful, would that still work in today's market?
Probably not. In the early days, it was all about promotions.
Right.
Everything was on promotion. There was continual sales, half price this and that, and free ovens and free finance and all sorts of silly
Everything's
offers.
free.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And most people were doing that, and it certainly does get feet through the door.
Right.
So when we took the decision to move away from those silly promotions, it was quite painful because suddenly all the customers would say, well, when's the next sale on? You know,
Right. Oh, they're almost expecting it, yeah.
because that was the way.
Right.
So it was a long, painful process withdrawing from those promotions. I mean, now there are virtually no promotions, really.
Right. Yeah, so for most manufacturers, they've almost all gone away from that, as opposed to investing in different areas, whether it be displays or training or what have you.
And I'm very pleased. I'm very pleased about that.
Right.
So really, social media is the thing. It's really getting the customers to like you, getting them on your side.
Yeah. So maybe if manufacturers are watching, rather than, I mean, we've just talked about it quite some length about marketing and social media. Maybe manufacturers could assist more retail with more maybe advice about social media, or more templates or more solutions around that subject.
Well, yes. I mean, we're fortunate in that we've got a very young workforce, and they seem to know about it naturally.
So they get it anyway. That's it. Yeah.
That's right. But if you're my age, you definitely need a lot of advice on that. Yeah.
Oh, we help each other, don't we? Richard, you mentioned earlier about installers and even administration being equally as important as sales designers. So what could you advise people watching on how to ensure that an installation is completed on time and to budget?
Yeah. Installers are a vital category. When we get a job which goes totally smoothly, or even if there's a few hitches, but we jump on them and put them right, then that is just so valuable. We get so many recommendations.
Oh, it's how you put it right, so.
That sometimes having to put something right actually demonstrates to the customer how good you are, because you've got people ready to jump on it,
right? And
they don't have to phone up a head office in Manchester to hopefully get a fitter down eventually.
Right, I'm with you, yeah.
We're actually there,
yeah.
And we can jump on any issues very quickly. I mean, obviously our aim is right first time, but I think more important than that is to be able to jump on an issue and put it right and more if necessary to get the customer happy. And then very often you've got a happier customer.
I mean, I knew a retailer once who used to say, Simon, we tell the customers that your kitchen will go wrong, but we will put it right for you. They condition customers.
That's very good.
How would you respond to
something similar? We say, we've been doing it for 40 years. Right. We know what we're doing, but we're not perfect.
Right, yeah. That's it, yeah.
But we're near as you can get.
You're nearest you're going to get to perfection. That's it. And some other people have said to me, when we're fitting a kitchen, we say to the customer, Simon, look, go away on holiday somewhere nice for a week, and then when you come back, your kitchen's being completed with minimal aggravation for yourself. What would you advise when people suggest that?
Well, we do that.
Okay.
That's not a problem.
Okay.
I mean, sometimes it is better if people are not in the house, because the fitter doesn't have to be so fastidious about clearing the dust every day.
Assuming a good survey and someone says, I didn't want that fitted there, and they get back from Tenerife or whatever it is.
The thing is, these days with communication, you've got FaceTime and all that. Then, so if you have got a query, you can usually get hold of the customer.
Works, yeah. So if some fitters on site and there's a question mark over something, they can just FaceTime and say to the designer, what did you mean to do here? And
that's that sort of thing, yeah.
It never happens when the installer says, I wouldn't have designed it like that. Never happens, does it, Richard?
Yeah, you obviously know this business.
On the back of what we just said there, I mean, how many installers bring you a bottle of wine every Christmas and say thank you ever so much for the business, Richard?
Installers? Well, no, it's more likely that we give them a nice present, actually.
All the way around, isn't it? Yeah.
because good installers are just so valuable. They really are. We spend a lot of time and effort in identifying good installers and gradually encourage them to come on board, which can take literally years in some cases to get hold of these people, because from their point of view, they're taking a risk, jumping to you. So you really
maintaining an installer. You need to be looking after them, as that's what you're suggesting.
You've really got to value them and look after them and understand them, because I think one problem is a lot of salespeople, administrators, accounts people really can't understand each other's jobs, and it's particularly difficult with installers when they're out on site,
Right.
and they're complaining about something which you really can't see what the problem is.
Nobody complains in kitchens, do they?
And the only answer really is to get out there on site and see what they're talking about, understand with them, sympathise with them, and come up with a mutual solution.
Yeah. Ashford, do you employ your installers or they subcontract?
They're all self-employed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there any benefits for either or, Richard, do you think?
We do have what we call a remedial fitter.
Ooh, okay.
That is on the books.
Someone with a van who can.
Yeah. Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. So remedials are very important, of course. Get those sorted
quick as you can. Yeah.
Right,
before they grow.
The good
The list gets longer.
The list gets longer. That's right.
Yeah. Get the remedials knocked on the head as quick as possible.
Yeah.
But fitters remain as subcontractors.
Okay.
And that has always worked really well for us.
Okay.
They have sign-written vans.
Right. Okay.
Black, so they look like company vehicles.
Okay.
But that's all part of
But
the.
you're still taking payment for the whole project from the customer.
Yeah,
So
we do.
The customer sees that you're in control of that. That's good.
Yes, I know that it's quite a popular idea to get customers to pay
the
fitters
fitter,
direct.
Yeah, that's right.
But putting myself in a customer's position,
Right.
I think I wouldn't be too keen on that.
That's really interesting to say. So what you're saying, that if you put yourself in the customer's shoes, you have to do that, don't you? And you're thinking about where's the confidence on the overall project when you explain the process up front. Yeah.
It's very easy for one to blame the other.
Yeah, that's interesting.
But when a customer's dealing with us, it's totally our project.
Yeah. And of course, your accountant might say, get them to pay the fitter direct, Richard.
Of course, yes, yes.
The margins
you do save money, yeah.
That's right. Yeah. Okay. So we were speaking earlier about salespeople, and salespeople tend to be a different breed from most because they're hungry go-getters, aren't they? But is it important to have someone working for, let's say, a salesperson, or should there be more a designer? How would you hire somebody?
Both skills are equally important.
Okay.
And we've taken on some people as designers and gradually mentored them into the skills of selling.
Okay.
But there are some individuals who are top-notch salespeople, and they're rarely as good a designer as specialist designers.
Right.
So you tend to either get a good designer, which is a fairly good salesperson, or an excellent salesperson who's a fairly good designer.
Yeah. So you're getting the balance of two. So I guess you mentioned training there. So training, I know Ashford, you're really keen on investing in your people. So how important should training be for a kitchen retail business?
Oh, it's constant training and mentoring, yes. Yeah. And fortunately, the suppliers we deal with, we tend to look at them as partners.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so they offer us loads of training, which we do take advantage of, although it's quite time consuming and fairly costly in a way. It's absolutely vital, really. Yeah. Absolutely vital.
I think employees or staff, they feel more valued if you invest more in them, don't they?
Oh yeah, and they
Which
usually
goes back
quite
to retention and so forth.
Usually quite enjoy a day out with their colleagues and
of course,
meeting other people, and it's a good experience.
The expense budget is kept to a minimum, I'm assuming. There you go.
Well, I think it should be enjoyable as well.
Yeah. Should a member of staff have a company credit card, Richard?
Well, we talked about this earlier, and it was a bit of a shock to me, but it works, so fine. Yeah.
Okay, well that's where we differ. So we understand that potentially in 10 years' time, a third of kitchen installers could be retired. Do you have any advice or solutions on how we could future-proof this?
Well, Simon, I have to say that is a very good point, but ever since I've been in the industry, I think that's been the case.
Right, okay. And you still is.
It's always been the case.
Yeah.
How do you get installers?
Yeah.
Because there are a lack of people training into the practical skills generally. So we're short of builders, short of roofers, we're short of tilers.
Yeah, I mean, the government want to build a lot of houses, don't they?
Yes.
But who's going to build the houses?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. I can't say it's got any better or worse, really.
Okay, so it's been the same over 40 years by the sound of it.
I would say so.
That's
I would say it's
interesting.
never been easy, and particularly perhaps in the London area,
Right.
southeast. Maybe
Yeah.
it's different in other parts of the country.
So what you said earlier, I was interested is that even more so potentially, you have to look after the good fitters.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, they
Yeah.
are. They are.
The wages gone up because of this situation?
Absolutely, yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
That's a higher
But
expectation.
rightly so.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a time, back in the 80s when we were drawing fitters from the northeast,
Right.
and they would come
Wow.
down.
Wow.
They'd come down on a Monday morning, leaving home at 4 a.m. or something,
Yeah, yeah.
fit a kitchen in the week,
Yeah.
and go back Friday night.
Yeah, that's it, yeah.
Simply because there wasn't the local
Yeah.
labour.
Right.
So
Okay.
I don't think it's got any worse. The only advice I can give people is when you get good fitters,
Right.
you've got to look after them.
And how many of the Ashford team are, under 30 that fit kitchens?
Not many.
So I'm just having, is it one maybe? I don't know. How
Under
many fitting
30?
teams are
Well,
you're working with?
One of our fitters, who's been with us probably 10 years or more,
All right, yeah.
his son works with him now,
Okay, that's good.
and he started from school.
Yeah.
And after a few ups and downs, he's really settled into it,
Yeah.
to it well, which is great to see.
Yeah.
We've got another fitter who's actually been with us 35 years,
Right.
famously, and excellent fitter, and customers ask for him by name
Right,
because
yeah.
they've been recommended. And he took on his son-in-law,
Right.
and they worked together for some years, and they used to have violent clashes. But generally it was fine,
Yeah.
until he eventually decided to go off on another
right.
path.
Yeah.
So we've had a few.
Yeah.
And also, going back a few years, do you remember Carillion?
Carillion, which is a main contractor.
Main contractor,
That's
yes.
right, yeah.
And they used to run apprenticeships for the government.
Right. Okay.
And they had a big base at Feltham, which is not too far away.
Okay.
And they used to send their apprentices to us for set periods to learn kitchen fitting skills.
Yeah. Okay.
Very hard work.
Yeah.
Very hard work. You got good and bad, and very difficult.
Yeah.
But quite pleasing when you got a good result occasionally.
Sure. I mean, you mentioned there, apprentices and being trained by Carillion. So how could Ashford or how could anybody else encourage their subcontract installer to hire an apprentice, and more so to recommend them on a government standard? So this is fitted furniture installation technician level 2, to professionalise that, so we become a more professional industry moving forwards. But how could we encourage installers to do that, or do you think perhaps they don't really understand how to do that?
Well, I don't know whether they don't understand, but I think, again, from the fitter's point of view, it's probably a bit of a pain for them, really, because they've got to get a young lad, well, I say lad, could be a girl, who really doesn't know nothing, and probably spends half the day on their phone.
Right, it happens, doesn't it? Yeah.
And it's more of a nuisance, really,
Right.
and quite time consuming, and can make costly errors, because you can't be watching them absolutely all the time.
Yeah.
So
Who's paying for the cornice when it was cut the wrong direction?
I wouldn't blame the
Right.
fitter for not being too keen.
Right.
On the occasions we've done it, we've usually sort of persuaded the fitter and incentivised them, really.
That could be a solution, and that's really great you said that, Richard, because that's almost giving a bit back to the industry. Because if other retail, it shouldn't be done the retailers' shoulders entirely, of course it shouldn't be, but I think collectively we have a responsibility to try where we can to bring in new talent and to train people to be able to do professional installations, don't we?
Yeah, it depends what you want the result to be, but I guess we all want to have more fitters on board. And the other benefit we get with taking on youngsters, sometimes work experience and that sort of thing.
Okay, that's a good solution, yeah.
To
Encourage people into the industry, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've found that on a number of occasions, it's paid off in an unexpected way, and that is that usually if you give somebody a good grounding at an early age, well, like my boss did 50 years ago,
You've caught the bug, haven't you?
Well,
That's it.
you never forget them.
That's right, yeah, 100%.
So we get their family and relations buying kitchens
yeah.
just because of that connection.
Yeah. Do you think there's anything that the government could do? So at the minute there's a review of, there's a new government body called Skills England about to be formed for the new year. And this is about a review of how do we spend levy, training, investment into industry. And is there something that perhaps the government should be doing with funding to help, let's say, a subcontract installer to actually take somebody on? Is there something different or something creative we could perhaps suggest, Richard?
Certainly incentivise the taking on of apprentices.
Yeah.
Going back again to the 1970s, we used to have the industry training boards.
Okay.
And in our industry, it was Distributive Industry Training Board.
Right.
And so you used to pay a levy to the government.
Yes.
As a percentage of a payroll.
That's right.
And then claim back money for valid training that was done, or taking on apprentices.
Yeah.
I mean, that all finished because I think it was abused, but it seemed in principle quite a good idea.
So
really.
you mentioned incentives, so maybe if the government wanted to think about the objective is building more houses, we're loosely under construction, aren't we, KBB? So maybe they could potentially review incentivising, an installer to take on an apprentice by maybe looking at the wage for the first half of the year, potentially, that sort of thing.
Well, that would be a good start, yes.
I mean, that would transform it, wouldn't it?
It would, yeah.
That's a suggestion. I mean, you mentioned it. It says your suggestion. So we could pilot it at Ashford, couldn't we? How about that?
Could do, yes. Yeah,
it would work. Yeah, there we go. I was going to ask you if you had any advice around how more KBB companies could or should be hiring, let's say, younger people. And actually, with Ashford, it seems to have massively worked where typically you have hired people, let's say, even without experience on kitchens sometimes, but you've trained them to do it the Ashford way. Can you just explain a little bit about why that's worked for you?
Well, I mean, I think it's absolutely brilliant the way it's worked because before my son and the other youngsters joined the business, I was firmly of the opinion that when people were spending huge amounts of money, what is huge amounts to most people, that they would want to deal with a more mature person.
Right, yeah.
But in fact, I've been proven totally wrong on that.
Okay.
We take really substantial orders and it's all young people dealing with it. And what I've found is that our customer base is probably middle-aged and upwards. And they actually seem to prefer being advised by youngsters.
Interesting.
Because what we're selling really is a fashion product.
Yeah, but isn't that because you've trained those individuals so well that they're confident in their delivery and the customer likes that approach? And perhaps because they are younger, it's even more impressive.
I think that's right, Simon. Yes, they are totally confident, but also it's almost like being advised by your own adult children.
Right.
They say, "Come on, Mum, that's old-fashioned. You want this," and they actually really latch onto that.
Right. Okay. So
really well.
They're almost, you're saying, in demographics and diversity, they're giving some new ideas and fresh thoughts that perhaps they wouldn't have thought about the customer. Yeah.
Completely.
Coming in.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. So within our industry, whose responsibility do you think it is to provide more information about how you would hire an installer apprentice or how you would hire a fitted furniture design technician apprentice? Where should that information come from in the industry and who should be shouting about it?
Well, I think the information is available. I had a look online since I was contacted by yourself, and there is quite a lot of information out there.
Yeah.
And I don't know, but I guess the KBSA could point people in the right direction.
Yeah.
And people like yourself, Simon.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think we're working with the KBSA in exactly that point. But I think also that as many times as we can have these kind of meaningful conversations and promote this to the industry, I think that's going to give us a more thriving future. Okay. Looking at some trade press articles, I've seen quite a lot of discussion around the name apprentice. So if somebody was to come into Ashford, I'm sure you wouldn't put a badge saying apprentice on their lapel, so to speak. But is that the right name for someone who's learning?
Well, personally, I quite like the name apprentice.
Yeah. Look at Donald Trump. There you go, the apprentice.
Absolutely.
Alan Sugar.
I think the name apprentice is good. It shows that person is probably starting on a minimal salary and is keen to learn.
Yeah.
And is having hopefully a professional training.
Yeah, because that works. I mean, the old adage of an apprentice was someone that was a tradesperson only, and they were on a building site potentially. But actually, an apprentice could be, as you said earlier, a technical kitchen designer, couldn't they?
Yes, I actually like the term apprentice.
Yeah, okay, good. So your thumbs up for that.
Absolutely.
It's really good to hear you mention earlier about manufacturers who are offering different training solutions or maybe training facilities. Is there anything else you think, just speaking colloquially, holistically, let's say, across the industry, that you think maybe manufacturers could do to help independent retailers train their staff?
I would say that's the case. Over the years, we've worked with probably fewer suppliers, majoring on certain suppliers, and that way it is a mutual benefit.
Yeah, it's a better understanding, isn't there? Yeah.
To be thoroughly trained. Yeah. And certainly the BSH Group are masters of that, and part of the deal with them is that we only get the top terms if we do all their training.
Oh, well, that's interesting.
So that is a financial incentive as well.
Like you're playing your board game, you pass go and you collect 200 quid. That's as long as you pass go.
Yeah, to be a 5-star master partner, you have to do all the training.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And you have to have everything on site working, functioning.
Yeah, and I think we've mentioned this like so many times, this training word, which is, I think Ran Mascara, she always says educate to inspire. And education is so important, which again the customer picks up on coming in the showroom. Maybe other manufacturers, perhaps that are not dealing with you, should think about this. Maybe could they offer, certain, whether it be online modules or what have you, or going to factory visits, where if you do all these things and truly become an expert at talking about their brand, that there is some kind of incentive, whether it be on terms or what have you.
Yeah, it does pay off.
That's smart. Yeah.
But I guess in return, the supplier wants some loyalty from that retailer if they're giving them all these things.
Exactly.
So it's got to work as a partnership.
Yeah, I love that. Great word, that. Yeah. Over the career at Ashford of 40 years, maybe before them it could be, do you have we always ask this question, it's the same question for everybody. Do you have an amusing story that you could relay that those watching that we could learn from?
Well, I don't know so much amusing, but when I started in my career, my boss sent me on a 2-year day release course.
A 2-year day release course?
So it was 1 day a week.
Oh, right, yeah.
In fact, it was actually an afternoon and evening on the basis...
It sends you away for 2 years, did you, Richard?
No. No, which was quite good because it meant that you had to give up your evening and the company had to give up their afternoon. Yeah. And that went on for 2 years, and it was on business management. And initially, like most youngsters, I probably thought, well, this is a waste of time. But as time goes on, you think, well, this is actually very good. I'm learning some really good stuff here. And a lot of it I still use today. And one particular thing I remember our marketing lecturer always used to say, and he used to say this in practically every lecture: look after your customers and your profits will look after themselves.
Look after your customer and the profits will look after themselves, yeah.
Now, I don't think you can actually take that too literally, but it's a very good thing to keep in mind always, isn't it?
Yes, it is, yeah. And I think you mentioned earlier about putting yourself in your customer's shoes, yeah.
Indeed.
You mentioned that. Is the customer always right?
Well, they've always got to think they're right, that's the thing.
Right. Richard Flower, thank you very much indeed.
Well, it's been very enjoyable. Thanks very much,
Thank you, Richard. Thank you for watching this special edition of our Legends series with Richard Flower. We hope you've enjoyed it. More importantly, I've taken away some great points from that conversation, primarily around investing in your people. In a challenging market, this is still required, and by doing so, you will reap the benefits. So if you like what you've seen today, please like, share and comment. We love your comments, and we look forward to bringing the next episode of Movers and Shakers or Legends very soon.